Ketchikan was the first port we visited in Alaska. And, it being the first port of a 22-day cruise, you have a lot of anticipation about it being the first place you're going to visit. And it is one of those really iconic cruise ports that pretty much I think every Alaskan cruise stops at. I had a pretty full day planned, so I had planned to walk around in Ketchikan in the morning, and then I booked a excursion through Princess Cruise Lines on the Aleutian Ballad, which is a crab fishing boat that was part of the series Deadliest Catch. Now, originally I was booked for a different excursion on this day, but one of the crew members from the ship actually came and gave a talk on one of our sea days, and I thought, wow, that excursion sounds really fun. So I just went ahead and booked it right after his talk, and I was not sorry because we had some great wildlife encounters during that excursion. You'll see that up ahead. As we came into the port area of Ketchikan, one of the things I noticed is that there were actually some other cruise ships already in port. And on the day that we were there were actually 3 Princess cruise ships there, as well as one from Holland America, and I think there maybe was even another cruise ship there. So it was very busy, and so you could tell it was going to be a busy day in the city of Ketchikan as well. Since we did get there a little bit later, I did have time to go ahead and go to the buffet for breakfast in the morning, so it was a nice relaxed pace, and then I went up on the upper floor of the ship so that I could watch us as we came into town and then as we docked. Now, the gangway for folks to get off the ship opened, I guess, around 10 a.m. So we did get there, like I said, a little bit later in the day. And since I didn't have my excursion scheduled till later in the afternoon, I had the whole morning to just walk around, relax, and take in the sights. I started with walking just along where all the ships were docked. And then I did look at there's a lot of shopping. So if you like to shop, Ketchikan is a great place to visit. There are not only like a lot of your typical like souvenir shops with t-shirts and hats and sweatshirts and all that stuff, but there's also a lot of jewelry shops in Ketchikan. And several of them even have a relationship with Princess Cruise Line where you can use your medallion, which is your little, disc that identifies you on the ship. You can actually use that to pay for things in town, and it'll just get charged to your account on the ship. So even if you wanted to run everything through that, you could do that as well. And sometimes you might think, why would you want to do that? But if you're using a credit card that gives you a multiplier on travel, but not on jewelry, if you buy jewelry, but it passes through your cruise account, you actually get the multiplier because when the cruise account charges your credit card, it's going to come through as a travel expense. So in case you're wondering why would you want to do that, that would be why. And then also because then you don't have to necessarily carry as much cash or as many credit cards with you when you're ashore. So then I just walked through town and found my way over to the Creek Street area. There's plenty of signage in town, so you can just follow the signs to get there. It's not hard. I did enjoy walking along a little bit of the marina area and seeing some of the kind of more day-to-day life. I did walk near where the lumberjack show is. I didn't have tickets for that, but I did kind of walk in that vicinity. There's a crab restaurant there as well if you are looking for some crab. And then I got to the Creek Street area, and I mean, it's beautiful. The creek just runs right through the middle, and then you have these just very colorful buildings along both sides of it, and then you can walk kind of through that area. So it was at one point during the gold rush times, the red light district. So they do kind of play that up a little bit, but it's really just a beautiful area to walk through. When we were there, the salmon weren't spawning yet. It was early June, so they weren't spawning yet. But if you do go later in the summer, the salmon do go up that creek as well. So you might have more possibility to have a wildlife encounter while you're walking through the Creek Street area. And again, it's all shopping there. So if you want to, get some special souvenir, or even if you just need to pick up like a raincoat or something you might have forgotten, then you can do that there. It was also where I saw the first bald eagle of my trip. Now, it turns out I was going to see a lot of bald eagles on my trip, But it was pretty exciting to see that first one. And there were quite a few of us that were standing around looking up the tree at this bald eagle that was there, because it was kind of the first stop for us. And so for a lot of us, it was the first time maybe we'd seen one that close. The Creek Street area does have like a wooden boardwalk that goes along. So it did seem like it was pretty mobility friendly for folks that maybe have some mobility impairments. So you are able to walk around through there. There were limited steps. So I definitely think that you could enjoy that as well. After I walked through the Creek Street area, then I decided to walk back to the ship, but I took a different path this time. And what that did is it allowed me to see some of the totem poles that are in Ketchikan. So I walked a different route, and so I got to see some different shopping, some additional totem poles. There's a small totem pole park in the area near the port. And then I actually went back and had lunch on the ship before my excursion. It was really nice to be able to just walk back to the ship and, freshen up, get a new bottle of water, go ahead and have lunch or a snack, and then be ready for my excursion. After I had my lunch, I went ahead and got back off the ship and went to the meeting point for my excursion. And this is the Alaska Crab Expedition and Wildlife Cruise, I think is how it was described. And this was going to be on the Aleutian Ballad, and the Aleutian Ballad ports really close to where the Princess ship was, so I didn't have to go very far to get to the meeting point. Just the fact that it was one of the boats that was on the Deadliest Catch show, it made me realize that they're not as big as they appear on camera. So I guess the camera adds weight to boats as well. Once I was on the boat, it did seem significantly smaller than I imagined when I'm watching that TV show. I guess I just expected to be a lot bigger than it was. Now they have retrofitted the Aleutian Ballad to be more of a pleasure craft, I guess. It does have, they put kind of like stadium seating in, so they can still drop the crab pods and then pick them up, but they don't have room to stack them all up like they do on the show, because that's now where the seating is. Once you board the Aleutian Ballad, then before they get started, they kind of go through their safety talk, but then they do start to kind of talk about life on the Bering Sea, what it's like being a crab fisherman. They talk about just how dangerous it really is. And they had several stories about times when that boat really should have sunk. They had quite a few stories of that. And how, at some point they just realized that they wanted to have, kind of a more leisurely lifestyle. And that's when they decided to then convert the boat over into something that they could use for these excursions and, kind of show people what it's like to be a crab fisherman, but without the pressure of actually being a crab fisherman. And they had really built up some great relationships with some of the other, folks locally, so that, they had permission to do some things that maybe other excursions might not have permission to do. And what they did is they did this great combination of demonstrating what it's like to drop one of the crab traps or bring one of the crab traps up, what the things they have to be concerned about from a safety perspective. They had a lot of stories that they told during this process. But then there was several times where they would stop and there'd be almost like a hands-on portion where you could, see what it felt like to kind of, try to throw the hook that they used to pull the line into the boat to put it up into the wheel to pull the crab trap up. You could handle a large crab just to kind of feel like, what it feels like. Some of them were pretty big. And then the area they took us to was beautiful. So we did have, maybe like a 20 or 30 minute boat ride to get to the area where they wanted to show us how they pulled up the traps or drop a trap. And then some really magical stuff happened. So one of the things that we were able to do is we went to this area where there's just a massive number of bald eagles. And because they're fishing on Native American water rights area, they have gotten permission to toss some fish for the bald eagles. And so it was pretty spectacular. There were just, like 50 bald eagles that were swooping down right next to the boat to get these fish. And they're the same kind of fish that they would get anyway if they were just getting them out of the water. It's just, we just kind of helped them out a little bit. And so seeing just all these bald eagles just coming down, it was just so amazing. And that alone would have made it worth it, even though I really enjoyed all the other stuff we had already done. But then, as we were heading back to port, we came up on a family of orcas. And so they had to cut the engines, and we just watched them. And they got so close to the boat, they had to kind of just turning up the engine a little bit just to kind of tap us away because the orcas were getting so close to the boat. But it was so amazing to see them. It was the first time I've actually ever seen a whale in the wild. So seeing them, and there was a family, and you could tell there was like a little baby orca because they were so close. It was really just amazing. Now, you're not always going to get that lucky, but I did feel like, man, that was an awesome excursion, especially because it was one I had booked last minute. My particular ticket also included what they called the crab snack. So I did get some crab legs on the boat that I was able to snack on. When we got back to port, then I went back to my cabin and freshened up, and then I actually got ready for dinner. So it was already that late. And I had reservations at the Botticelli dining room, it's one of the main dining rooms. The Botticelli, you make reservations ahead of time, but it's not like the same table, the same reservation every day. So I just made one for myself for that night. And often what I would do is I would look at the menu, and usually in the morning I would just look at the menu for the day and see if it was one where I wanted to eat in the dining room as opposed to eating in the buffet. The menu looked good for that day, so I went ahead and made a reservation so I'd have a nice sit-down meal when I came back to the ship. Yeah, and it was great. I started with a wedge salad. I had a Parmesan crusted cod, I think, as my entree. And then I opted to have a little cheese plate as my dessert. I enjoyed a glass of Chardonnay. Now, I was on the Princess Plus package, and one of the benefits of that package is that you do have, in some ways a drink package. So my glass of Chardonnay was just included with my package. It wasn't an extra cost, and there's no extra cost to eat in any of the main dining rooms either. So that was all included, but it was nice to have table service. In this case, I had dinner as a solo traveler. I had my own table. Later in the cruise, I do some meals at a shared table, so I'm with other passengers and I get to know them a little bit. But on this particular night, I did have a solo seat. After a day filled with wildlife and adventure and lots of walking, it was really nice to sit down and have a relaxed meal, be able to just look out the window. Because this was a solstice cruise, the sunsets were very late at night, and so oftentimes after dinner it was still light outside and you could go walk around on the promenade deck. And it was often still light out when I went back to my cabin at night, just because it did stay light out so late. But it did make me really appreciate having my interior cabin, because it did make it a lot easier for me to sleep because it would be nice and dark. So that was my day in Ketchikan. I did lots of walking. I enjoyed visiting downtown and seeing the sights. I had a great adventure on the crab fishing boat. Awesome wildlife encounters. It's really hard to beat those. And then I had a nice relaxed dinner in the evening. So next up will be Wrangell, Alaska. And that is a much smaller port, and it's not nearly as busy as Ketchikan was. So I really did get to enjoy some quiet time in Wrangell, and did some hiking, made some friends on my hike, got to see just some really cool sights there. So that'll be my next video. So be sure to subscribe, like this video so that you keep getting these in your YouTube feed to make sure that you can follow along with the rest of my trip.